Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, heck, we're even on TikTok. We're excited to engage with you. We hope you'll join us moving forward.
Good morning. Happy Friday, everyone. Today, we are happy to have Brian Ostroff back on, who's President and CEO of Arianne Phosphate. We love having Brian on because he talks about all the key things that we see happening and that we want to talk about, and gives us a wealth of education and knowledge, whether it's from supply chain, from food and fertilizer need and growth. But we're also going to touch now into other sectors that they had a press release out about, which we'll let Brian kind of lead off with. But we're really excited to have you back on. We always learn so much, and your stock's doing great. Things are looking pretty good, and there's a whole new opportunity that's blossoming before you, and we're looking forward to kind of getting into that a little bit here.
Great. Well, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I love coming on the show. I love the back and forth, and as we were saying backstage, even. I like just listening to the two of you go back and forth.
Oh, awesome.
So, so again, thanks. You're probably referring to the news we put out middle of last week, where we're doing some more work on the advanced battery technologies. So. In specific, that would be the lithium iron phosphate batteries, the LFPs. So look, as you led in with, the whole electric vehicle market is extremely current now. People are paying a lot of attention. People are kind of trying to sort out what chemistries and what's going to be the winner, the loser, and the reality is there's probably going to be several winners, but they're going to be in different segments. So who's going to lock up what? And certainly the lithium iron phosphate battery has been making great strides and penetrating different segments of the automotive market. Kind of the brief history. Oh, sorry. Go
I was going to say, I was going to ask you, because I think we spoke privately about that, and I was asking you, where does this the lithium iron come in? And I was kind of referencing it to compared to, say, like an Audi A8 compared to like an S1 or something, or like a 1 Series BMW to a 5 Series. I kind of was looking to put in context, what segment of the market is this looking to attract? Where is it going? Because it talks about the chargeability and it talks all those types of things with the battery.
So, I think to that point, look, the history of the LFP, it's been around for a while. And I think the belief going back a few years was it would get a small share, subcompact, urban Asian market. A couple of years ago, the technology really did advance, and that's allowed that charge to go longer. Started to make some news about a year ago when Tesla had announced that their Model 3s in China were going to use the LFPs. And that was really kind of the first move for a non-Asian car company to start to talk about the LFPs. And then we saw it kind of proliferate from there. So Volkswagen, first quarter, second quarter of this year, talked about them looking to put the LFPs in their cars, and other companies coming along. Now obviously the big news, I suppose, 3-4 weeks ago was when Tesla announced that globally, all of their standard range vehicles were going to use these batteries. And so, look, Tesla is definitely the company that everyone's looking at in the EVs. And And look, it's also a market favorite, a darling, and so what they say gets a lot of attention. And if they're going to go LFP and Volkswagen's going LFP and some of these other guys are going LFP, then I think LFP is going to be the winner. But to your point, what's the market? So I think again it's going to be the standard range, the subcompact, all the way through to the mid-size. Look, if you're a farmer and you're on a big farm in Indiana and you're 400 kilometers away from whatever, this isn't going to be the battery for you.
Yeah.
But if you need 350 kilometers on a charge, which for most of us that's going to be just fine, particularly in an urban setting, this battery is going to work just fine. Now, if you want to be in a sports car that goes 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, then it's not going to be fine. The attractiveness, of course, of the LFP versus some of the other chemistries that you've talked about, the nickel, the cobalt, look, those elements are more expensive. They're harder to source. Certainly when you're talking about things like cobalt, you're primarily talking about the DRC, it's conflict mineral. Even if you could get the stuff, even if you could absorb those higher prices, the projected curves of the EVs are, you might be able to get those materials now, but looking into the future, are you really going to be able to get that ramp? One of the things as you speak with pundits in the space is really a matter of they poo-poo these growth curves, not because they're not a believer that the consumer will adopt them. They question ultimately, where are you going to find and be able to ramp the materials necessary quickly enough to meet those curves. So the beauty of the LFP, of course, it is lithium, but then it's iron and phosphate, and those materials are easier to find. Now, in the case of phosphate, you do ultimately need to take that phosphate and turn it into a high purity phosphoric acid, and that's what's used in the batteries, as opposed to just maybe a more generic phosphoric acid, which is what makes its way into fertilizer. So depending on the type of phosphate you're starting with, the lower grade stuff, yeah, you can upgrade it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. So ideally, you definitely want to be starting with something that, is a little bit better quality.
The premium.
Absolutely.
The jet fuel.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, that's obviously a plus. And so where's the advantage in the LFP? Again, the material should be more readily available. At the very least, it shouldn't be a huge constraint to the growth curve. They're less expensive. They're a lot more stable as a battery. They don't go boom, which is a problem, of course. So these are all pluses. And again, with the advances in the technology, the charges last longer. They do charge faster. You get more cycles. So the LFP really looks like it's going to be winning out here again in a decent segment of the automotive market. I'll just throw in also just kind of quickly that, of course, it's the LFP for the car that's getting all the attention. Again, Tesla and very sexy. But LFPs are also being used and worked with in the energy storage systems market. So, there are companies out there working with these batteries to use them for the home market or small grid substation type applications, and looking out into the future, that could be pretty exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the kind of safety factors as well, because that was something that stood out to me, especially when you're comparing them to, say, like a lithium cobalt. From my understanding, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, there's a big jump in safety if you're using kind of a lithium iron phosphate battery. That, like you said, they're far less likely to go boom, which is always a good thing. We've got a good question here just in the chat that I'm gonna, if we can get Adam to throw it up. But Elliot's asking, can these batteries be recycled, or are they sort of a one and done? Is this a factor? What's the kind of lifespan with these kind of batteries?
Yeah, those are all great questions, and as I've said in the past, and will say again, I am far from a battery expert. I mean, the genesis of us and our involvement, again, we have a phosphate deposit, a world-class phosphate deposit, and about 8-9 months ago, a couple of the battery guys reached out to us. Obviously an interest in phosphate. We can get in a little, the ability to make a high purity phosphoric acid from our stuff is a plus, but it's one more constraint on a tightening phosphate market. And so I don't know a ton. Again, what I've been what I've learned over the last few months, look, I think recycling of all of these batteries and being able to get back at those components is a big deal. Unfortunately, I do not know where the LFP stands on that. My understanding is in a lot of these chemistries, people are really trying to get back that lithium or what have you. The iron, the phosphate.
Yeah.
Is it such a big deal?
I can jump in. I don't know, and I can't speak specifically for the phosphate ones, but I do know, like American Manganese, they do what's the kind of cute term is urban mining, and they will recycle batteries. So whether it's a car battery or it's a bigger battery, they can. I need to go check up on them, and I'll reach out to them maybe to see how that technology is progressing, where they're at with it. But that's a great one to fit into this kind of recyclable story, this reusable world or cyclical world we're trying to create as well. So let me reach out to them, Elliot, as well, and I'll send you a message. And that leads me into talking about the phosphate part. Is you've got high grade phosphate, and one would go, well, shouldn't we really keep that because the yields on crop and food's pretty important in life? Wouldn't it be better to use for food? I mean, it's awesome that it can be used for making a battery. Is it kind of like a sprinkling of this stuff that you need, or do you need a large amount of this phosphate, the high grade, to make this battery kind of stuff work? Is it like a massive, I mean, obviously there'd be a huge demand. I mean, the amount of cars we're gonna have on the road that are electric is, I mean, it's shockingly large. What's your kind of, I mean, it's a tougher one. What's your take on it? Because, it's fertilizer, it's for food. And then you could probably, in theory, if you've got the high grade there, it could just be one car company could go, we'll just take it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to come at this question a few different ways.
Sure. Yeah.
As with every new or emerging technology, you get a whole lot of people with a whole lot of opinions and what the size of the market is going to be. And this is no different. We've spent a decent amount of time now speaking with guys in the industry from the battery side, from the automotive side, some of the consulting firms that just kind of throw out projections. And I'll tell you that the numbers are truly all over the map. I guess if I were to put them in a bell curve and maybe adjust for, the source that I get those numbers from, the guess is looking out a few years from now, you'll need 3 to 5 million tons of phosphate concentrate to meet kind of your battery demand. Now, look, I'll tell you, there are a couple of car companies that I've spoke with that laugh and say that number is way too low, and a couple of analysts that I've talked with that say that number is way too high. So, the fact that both sides disagree, maybe we're kind of getting into the right ballpark. But again, one of the beauties, I suppose, of using material like phosphate, let's call it, I don't know, whatever, 4 or 5 million tons. In the grand scheme of things, that 200 million tons a year is what the phosphate market's at today in terms of the concentrate. So you're looking at an extra 2-3%. It shouldn't be a huge dislocation, but again, a lot of it's really going to come. What's the phosphoric acid that you can make for it?
Yes.
So, now, to your point, is this what we should be doing with our phosphate? Look, what's more important, a Tesla in your driveway or food in your fridge? and can you have both? And so, look, I guess the hope is that we can have both. But there's no question that the phosphate market is definitely, it's getting tight. I think the last time I was on your show, we talked about China and how they were halting the exports of all their phosphate fertilizers. Yes. Interestingly, towards the end of last week, the Russians have now talked about putting an export quota on some of their fertilizers, including MAP and DAP, and so it's not an outright halt, but they're putting a quota, and it's basically our farmers are going to get everything they need, our industries are going to get everything they need, and if we have anything left, well, then we're prepared to sell it. That really does bring about the much bigger question of, okay, that works in Russia where they have, and it works in China where they have, and works in, various jurisdictions in the Middle East where they have. But, what about areas like Western Europe or North America or South America or various countries in Asia where, we're really reliant? So you kind of have this whole nationalism building. The other interesting thing, and it maybe goes back to the LFPs and what's the demand really look like. There were those that actually threw out the idea that maybe one of the reasons why the Chinese were halting the exports of their phosphate fertilizers, and is basically, look, maybe there is a reproportioning of the phosphate that they have, because the LFP business is booming. The Chinese absolutely dominate that market.
Yeah.
I think they want to remain dominant. And, the question becomes, can they, with their phosphate, meet the growing LFP demand and meet the growing world fertilizer demand? And maybe not. And if it's a maybe not, then their answer is going to be, okay, well, we're going to be the player in LFPs, and we're going to make sure that our farmers have all the stuff that they need. And that's where the phosphate's going.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. We'll see. It just, it's interesting. I was on a chat earlier this morning, and we're seeing supply disruptions everywhere, and it's because of logistics. It's you know, we've talked about this on your show a lot.
Yep.
The whole just-in-time delivery, and that's great as long as you can get the stuff just in time.
Yes.
And you know, now there are challenges, but also we've seen this with the semiconductors in cars.
Yep.
And it's really forced, you know, not only the automotive industry, but a lot of industries to go and assess, and what does their supply chain look like, and how protected is it, and are they themselves going to have to make sure that they are vertically integrated?
Yes.
You know, back to the cars and the car batteries. I think it was BMW about 4 or 6 weeks ago had actually given an offtake directly to a lithium mine.
Yeah.
And so, you know, are you going to start to see that? Are you going to start to see that in different industries? Are you going to see that with the LFPs? Look, you know, straight up from where Arianne sits, I'm pretty agnostic. Our path forward is we need a couple more sizable offtakes, and that should unlock our financing and allow us to build our mine.
Yes.
Is it
So yeah,
from
you'll
a
take it where you can get it
company?
for sure. Why not?
Yeah, Ford company, battery company,
Yep.
automotive company. You know, we're talking to a lot of people and looking to nail that down. The beauty is, again, we have various avenues that have opened up to us.
It's interesting too, because I wanted to bring this up, is just kind of for people to get information, and people talk about misinformation and this and that all the time. Here's a mixed message for you, and you'll laugh at this one. I posted this out the other day, and it's the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. So he goes up at COP26 and says, enough of treating nature like a toilet, enough drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves. I kind of put out saying, I think someone forgot to tell this guy that all of your green and clean solutions come from mining, because what is he actually asking for? And this, you know, it's obviously either complete, it doesn't understand what space we're going into, or what the actual, this same group, the UN and World Economic Forum, what they're actually promoting, which is this electric future. He either has been left out of that conversation entirely, or purposely sending a mixed message to environmental types to just, I don't know. But it's shocking to go, once someone would hear that and go, oh, wait a second, are we not doing this then? And at the same time going, and you're shutting down, you know, oil and gas and anything, so you're not going to have energy, you'll have no storage. What's the plan then? And it's tough today, because anyone serious would see, okay, we see where the funds are being allocated, we see the electric future. At the same time, you have this kind of thing, and it throws chaotic times into chaotic markets of going, is anybody talking to each other? What's going on?
Yeah, you know, we're really, I think the world is trying to feel its way through and thread the needle, because, you know, to your point, we want to have a greener future, but some industries that right now people don't consider green are going to be vital for that green future. So, you know, what do you do? And look, we're going to have to understand that you're not going to zero carbon right away.
No.
What you're going to do is that carbon, those fossil fuels, that mining, you're doing it in the hope that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe you're not as reliant. But, you know, guys, to your point, you've got to mine phosphate, iron, lithium,
Yes.
vanadium, manganese, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and you know, any rare earths. I mean, these are all the materials that we're going to require if we're going to have a greener future. So I think what the answer is to try and figure out how to mine as green as possible.
Yeah.
But understand that, you kind of do the best you can in the hope that years from now that overall carbon footprint comes down. But it's not going to zero tomorrow. And look, another fertilizer component is ammonia, nitrogen, and that comes from natural gas. And you see what happened in Europe, and natural gas prices went nuts, and decarbonization, and huge spikes in demand because, there are those that argue that the move was too radical away from the coal-fired power plants. And so now all that natural gas is going there, and next thing you know, a bunch of these ammonia plants and where that was used to produce fertilizer, bye-bye. And so great. So fewer coal-powered fire plants, less food on the shelves.
It's interesting too, because a few years ago, Macron had shut down the whole nuclear industry in France, and that's their main industry for energy. He's announced, I think it was just yesterday, the day before, that, okay, we're going to go back and we're going to open them up again. Because, what was the plan? Like that's it. Like, whether you like it or not, I know people have very strong feelings on uranium and on nuclear, but it is the cleanest. If your concern is the environment and green, that's it. That's the one. So it's this tough situation that we're in, and it's all coming to a head where decisions have to be made. Are we going for it or are we not? And speaking to this too, because we try to avoid some of the politics of it, but one of the politics things I find so frustrating is this notion of don't be protectionist, don't go America first, don't think of your country first, should be this, that. I'll say, well, that's fine. That's a nice la-di-da idea to have in your head, but that's not what other countries are doing. China has been stockpiling for a long time. They know what's up. They're treating this as they should, with their own interest at heart. And they've been doing that. This is not hard to go find out. It's no conspiracy or anything of that nature. So at the meantime, you have confused, especially in the West, in Europe and North America, going, well, shouldn't we all just get along and share? And it's like, well, we're not at that place right now. And that's a nice idea to have. But if you can't secure your supply chains to make any of these things come true, whether it's for fertilizer or for food, which is pretty important, I think we all agree, or whether it's to get this energy problem solved, if you leave it in the hands of the Chinese being the deciding factor because they have the stockpile, you're going to see some interesting times ahead. Yeah,
well, that's the Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times. And so, I think we are in interesting times. To your point, look, I agree. Like the whole free trade, or even the capitalist view, let the market decide. That works if everyone's
doing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work particularly well if only some. And you know what? I'm not even casting judgment on what is the right way. Should we be slightly protectionist?
Yeah.
But I think in an environment, a world where there are those that are protectionist, and we'll see that their interests come first. Those who aren't doing it that way, really, you might need to think about it. And it could be challenging because, again, here in the West, we're very capitalism, sell to the highest market, procure, get the stuff from somewhere else. If you have to pay more, you build it into your sales price, and the market will sort it all out. But, again, we're starting to deal with some commodities that might want to be a little bit so yeah, definitely a challenge.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you taking the time, Brian. I'm just going to ask one more question. I can't remember if we've talked about this before, but it was going through my mind as we were talking there. in the terms of actual phosphate itself, and I think I have actually asked you this before, the mining process for phosphate, is it relatively straightforward, easier processes, or would it be considered kind of a more difficult process on the mining front? And then second, to kind of go along with that, because you touched on this ESG idea, what is kind of your guys' initial ESG strategy as well on how you're going to kind of tackle the environmental side of things and doing this responsibly and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, great question. So just as a quick reminder, so most of the world's phosphate comes from a sedimentary deposit, and that's over 90%. That's the stuff in the Middle East and Florida, and so I mean it is relatively easy to mine in that it's basically sand that you're scooping up and looking to separate out your phosphate. The challenge with those deposits are they have a lot of other deleterious elements in them. So there's radioactive elements, there's heavy metals like cadmium, and because of the nature of those deposits, it's actually more challenging to get it separated and get a phosphate concentrate that is much higher in purity and doesn't have some of those elements that you just don't want.
Right.
Now, in the case of Arianne, we have an igneous deposit. They're pretty rare. There's maybe a dozen in the world, and they're formed differently. They're formed similar to a gold or a copper deposit, where it came from beneath, and you had lava flows, and they just happen to be rich in apatite, which is the mineral that contains the phosphate. So from a mining standpoint, it's pretty easy to mine. It's really no different than a gold mine or a copper mine, but it is hard rock. It's not sand. So you are blasting and you're crushing, but because in essence this is virgin rock, it's very easy to separate out the phosphate, which is what you need. And also, because of the nature of these deposits, they don't have the same level of contaminants, and certainly not the really bad ones like the radioactive or the heavy metals. Now, to your point with regards to Arianne and ESG and that, look, we are going to be, as far as mining goes, a very environmentally friendly mine. Will be powered by a hydroelectric dam. It's about 30 kilometers away. We've contracted for our life of mine supply. Look, it's renewable energy. It is clean. Fortunately, being in Quebec, it's also relatively inexpensive. The oversized haul roads are already there, so it's not as if we have to build new roads. So I think on the scale, we're really going to be pretty good. And of course, again, the phosphate that we make is a pretty clean phosphate. So the process and the end product, I think that people should be very happy with, because again, to your point, you're not going to have a life without mining or industry or anything like that. So you do the best you can with what you got, and arguably Arianne's going to be a best you can.
Terrific.
And we'll wrap this up too, because I wanted to throw this in there. I know the Montreal Journal had an article out, and it's kind of talking about Quebec, because we've talked about Quebec being so ahead of the curve too with in mining. They're very obviously mining positive, but especially they see this energy shift. The whole Quebec government's on board with this. They've been in talks with Tesla, so that's an interesting thing that's been developed. I think it was 4 days ago, an article came out talking about Tesla being in talks with the Quebec government over a multi-billion-dollar investment battery discussion. So once again, it's just adding to this kind of story. Maybe it adds another dimension for an offtake for you guys to get this project over the last kind of steps. But that, I think, it adds bodes well for Quebec. The necessity of having a strong backer like the government who sees the vision of what's going forward, all that coming together. We don't know what the future is going to bring, but it's certainly the story is developing for you guys as well. And having that supply chain from a trusted partner like the US and Canada, we've got great relationships. Even when they're strained, they're pretty good. It's a lot easier to move things between friends than it is trying to ship them. We know that shipping costs have gone up 400 or 500%. So just I wanted to throw that in there to wrap it up, and then you could kind of take us away.
Yeah. So I mean, just with regards to that, Quebec is a great jurisdiction. To your point, they're very forward thinking. It's very interesting because a lot of the patents, a lot of the work, early days in LFPs actually did come out of Quebec. And the Quebec government, I think rightly has the view, Quebec is very rich in natural resources, but if you ship those natural resources to someone else and they do the value add and they're the ones that upgrade those resources into whatever that product is, they're capturing a lot of margin. So yes. I think with LFPs, look, Quebec is also a jurisdiction that cares a lot about the environment. So, but they're pragmatic. Everything we just said, at the end of the day, you're not going to be zero mining or zero emissions or anything like that, but you do what you can, and it does matter. So, you have a lot of technical know-how, intellectual around the LFP. And guess what? Quebec also has the L, which is lithium, and they've got the F, which is iron.
Lots of iron, yeah.
And they got Arianne, which is the P.
Yes.
So, you know what? I think Quebec is definitely playing to its strength, and I think they're going to do a great job with this.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Brian, so much for coming on again. We love having you. It's always a treat to cover all the things that we like to talk about and also help kind of educate all of our subscribers. So enjoy your weekend.
Great.
Have a great one.
Thanks. You guys too. Actually, I think you guys shipped us your weather. It's raining, very rainy. No. Okay. So anyways, there you go.
We're just sharing with you.
Perfect. Great.
Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right.
Thanks, Brian. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.